Good evening and welcome to Prose with the Pros. We're so excited that you've joined us for an hour of inspirational reading. We have a lot of fun in store for you tonight. I'm your host, Steve Friedman, and we have a great lineup this evening. So let me introduce the three readers that are going to join me for the hour. So Jim Ziegler is going to join us. He'll be sharing his stirring and haunting novel, The Call, this evening. Margot Katz presents Among the Lesser Gods, When Tragedy and Redemption Are Bound Together. Deborah D.E.E.P, Mouton, Houston's own poet laureate, will wrap up our evening with a moving performance from her book Newsworthy, fresh from today's chilling headlines. Please also feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll get to some of them after each reading and perhaps a bit more at the end of the hour. So now we move on to our fourth reader tonight, and that's Deborah D.E.E.P Mouton. So very excited to introduce her to the crowd. So a little bit of a bio for Deborah. Born in Riverside, California, Deborah D.E.E.P Mouton is an internationally recognized performance poet and the first African-American poet laureate of Houston, Texas. Formerly ranked #2 female performance poet in the world, she is a founding member and executive director of VIP Arts Houston, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting literacy and the arts in underserved populations. Her genre-bending poetry has engendered unconventional collaboration with groups as disparate as the Houston Rockets and the Houston Ballet. Mouton lived and taught in Houston. Mouton's debut collection, Newsworthy, has garnered international attention. Its German translation will debut in the fall of 2020 under the title SayTheirNames under Elif Verlag. So now I'm pleased and proud to introduce Deborah D.E.E.P Mouton. Thanks for joining us, Deborah.
So I'm excited to be able to share some work from my recent collection, Newsworthy, which you see kind of behind me right here. When I sat down to write Newsworthy, I really was kind of inundated with everything that was happening at the time. Trayvon Martin had just died or just been killed, I'm sorry. And I found myself as a Black woman really looking for the words and the way to process through the difficulty that it was to be a danger to so many people in their eyes and to be a target in so many people's eyes. And so I found myself really searching for ways to connect the idea of what it is to grow up as a Black woman in America, to explain that, you know, people are not scared on day 1 or day 2, but by week 3, year 20 of our lives of seeing people who look like us be persecuted and oppressed, we tend to react and we want to find a way to level the playing field and also to be heard. And so I hope that that's what Newsworthy does. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it because I just want you to listen to the words. So the first piece is called The Time We Learned to Report. I will say that the book is a collection of reactionary poems to people and incidents that happened worldwide, as well as my own interjection of things that happened in my life with my family. And so you'll hear the name Omandla, which is a stand-in for myself, which is a South African rally cry that means power to the people, because I think that for me, power is the one thing that we're all struggling to find. Summer Stoops, South Central Los Angeles. 2 children playing news. Josh kneels behind a makeshift cardboard desk, his 9-year-old legs finding it awkward to bend into childhood. Within reach, a yellow Play School tape recorder. Inside, a cassette labeled Summertime Jams. MC Hammer, Ace of Base, recording tabs taped up, cued for the erasing and re-recording. Josh broadcasts. Breaking news. Today, a house built by my own 2 hands went up in a ball of flames. Inside, a brave G.I. Joe tried to save babysitter Barbie, but it was too late. Tearjerker. Now let's go to Amandla in the field. Amandla. His sister 5 pushes flower barrettes from her forehead. Spoon microphone clings her chin. Today, the jump rope record was broken again, 20 times and counting. I did it. I'm the best. Josh interrupts. Says not news. Too naive. Can't see what's important. Table shutters under silent weight. Amandla stomps out, whispers, I'm gonna tell. Now live from the field, cutouts spilling from cupped hands. Watch the story light. First time around the block. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Feet syncopate hopscotch under ripe street lights. Sun crawls down the backside of the mountain. We sand our hands on four squares and rubber balls. We bounce Sally Walker and a cool drink of Kool-Aid powder and sugared Ziploc till all parts of our mouths stain cherry rebel defiant. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Streets so alive in LA. Don't nobody want the night to come. Just want the day forever. Run like highway. Turn ourselves invisible when mama calls. Don't take that ball all angry the day done left you, boy. That street light not hot yet. Ignore the glow for the sting of pop rocks in our cheeks and big league tiring our chew. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 this time. When mama calls, seems more ambulance in her throat, more flashing light in her eyes, more than just a halogen flickering bulb on concrete. She says our names like there are blood moons in a clear sky that no one wants to see, like a routine turn to red mouth outcry, a frenzy of our shadowy feet cockroaching from the asphalt towards our mother's arms, unaware. 5, 4, 3, 2, run. The unknowing left that night. We watched their feet turn Rodney soccer ball. Police, no longer a place to run when lost. Police, run longer or be a lost place. Colored lips gushing a bloody drink, more thirsty for the darkness than the sun, and we, a chalk outline number needing to be stomped. I was raised in LA, and I remember my parents taking me to South Central right after the riots and Rodney King, and having me clean up the streets and remarking to me that it was my community too, even if I didn't live there. And I think there's something around being a Black woman that ties me to a greater community that says, no matter where I live, whether it's LA, whether it's Houston, whether it's Detroit, which are all places I've lived, that there's something universal that connects us. And so the next piece is dedicated to James Byrd, who was killed in Jasper, Texas. I didn't understand the phrase chicken with its head cut off until you. They called you Bird, envied your strut round town enough to wrangle it into a pickup bed, a ride to coop, another name for slaughter. To behead a bird should be the most humane execution. Wrung your neck against a blind culvert. You molted over 3 miles before they realized you weren't even alive. Just a headless shell of plumage strewn over skid-marked asphalt, exhaust defeathering your limbs. When they dropped you in the mouth of the cemetery, I began to crave monster, a delicacy for the draggable. But like we know and have seen in past weeks, things like this don't just stop or go away. They continue and they escalate and they get bigger and they gain speed and they gain bodies and they gain names so quickly that we can't remember them all. So for Eric Garner. Before bedtime, my father's father would grab us by the feet, tickle until the laughter would stream from us. My father's rendition was to trap us between our legs, arrest our lungs in the suspension of howl, double us over on the floor until we swore the wind wasn't in us. There was a father on the corner when the CDs dropped, a snigger caught sneaking bread piece, no foul cry, no stop in sight, until the cops remembered theirs, brought the night early, held him until he cried, until his feet found no ground, collapsed, deflated, a father in fable, his oxen blue face. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And we watched. And we watched. I cried a sea of Black youth that would never grow into fathers of anything. But gender is not enough to stop it, right? I read about a lot of men, but as I said, being a Black woman doesn't pull me away from the danger. And I think I always knew that, and until I saw things happening, I'm sorry, it was only amplified when I saw things happen like Rakia Boyd and Sandra Bland here in Houston, or near Houston, in Prairie View. And I remember thinking how close she was physically to my back door, 38 miles to be exact, and knowing that we would have met and been friends had I just gone to a party where I was supposed to meet her, a good friend of ours said he had someone he wanted me to meet, and I missed meeting her because I just didn't feel like going to the party that night. And I think about how close all of us are in proximity to each other. And so for Sandra Bland, this will be the last piece I read, and then I'll open to questions. So if you have them, feel free to drop them in the chat. They will try to sell you the myth of my lips, that I talked myself into more trouble than my color would let me live through. Try to convince you I knew how to chameleon into 2 hours of unangled camera feed static with 2 hands. Mistook myself for Hera. Dangled myself from gold-chained plastic bags. They will try to say I was quicksand. Too much Texas, not enough blind obey. My character, tin can on a backwood fence. Tell them I never sat still enough to be anyone's easy target. Tell them I've never been able to stretch my lips wide enough to swallow my whole self this time. The body in the cell had no holy water for spit, but had more God in her than the Bible Belt. Make them wince my name until it echoes indictment. Teach them we have always been black magic, never intended to. Thank you. Send it back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Deborah. Quite moving. I remember when I saw you perform at a conference about a year ago, and very impactful. And certainly this year's had a lot of more events, unfortunately, that make it timely as ever. We do have some time for questions, so I have a couple of questions for you, if you may. What connection does your book have with the current rise in racial tensions we're watching and happening? What are your thoughts these days?
Absolutely. I think, we say that there's this rise in racial tensions, but I don't think there is. I think there's just more attention, right? We're all home. We can focus in on it. Maybe it's more trending on our timelines, but the reality is this is a problem that, I remember happening in 1992, and that was me as a young child, right? And so this has not been new. It's just now been videoed. And I think it's really important to realize that, our new social age has pushed things like the death of Breonna Taylor to the front of the headlines, like the death of George Floyd, but that these people have been dying for years without a name that was trendy and without someone following or advocating for them in the streets. And so I feel like, the work that I wrote in Newsworthy is the same sentiment and is the same heart and it's the same explanation of a fear that we've had for years, and one that we've been looking for a way out of.
So with all the demonstrations and so forth over the last several months, do you feel like we're on a path on a righteous path to repair some of these problems, or is this just part of a long journey that seems to possibly go nowhere?
Yeah, I mean, my hopeful side wants to say that we're making progress, right? But my hopeful side has let me down so many times. And I think for us to think that we have accomplished something is the wrong feeling. I think that it's going to be a continuous effort to tear apart the racist underpinnings that a lot of our country was built on, right? This is not one problem. This is a symptom of a system that was created with the goal to oppress and silence some over others. And so I think as we continue to tear the layers off, we need to be willing to continue to advocate for things like Black maternal health, right? And to look at systems like redlining and the fact that, my home mortgage rate is higher than everyone else's because I put that I was a Black woman on my application, right? And there are these things that will consistently be inequitable. And until we have a heart that's really willing to tear them apart and to rebuild them, we're going to continue to see flare-ups, if nothing less, of the problems that we see manifesting today.
Okay. One last question for you for now. So how do you still hold room for joy when you're writing about some of these really difficult and painful topics?
Absolutely. I love to say that Black joy is the ultimate act of rebellion, right? I think that to be joyous in a time where you are seen so dangerously or that is so dangerous, and that goes for all of us, is a difficult thing, but a necessary thing. For me, I don't think that joy lives separately from sorrow. I often say that joy doesn't ask sorrow for permission, right? One doesn't have to exist without the other, but I think of times in my life, like funerals, when I'm laughing at the repast, like that there is something joyous that lives even next to things that are tragic, that allow us to be able to process and to hold on and to connect with each other. And so if nothing else, I see that this time where the visibility around the deaths of Black people is high, that there's a new compassion renewed in some people, right? And that in and of itself is a reason for joy.
Great, thank you very much. From the younger you, would you have taken a different path with the knowledge you have today? Certainly I think that I would, if I sat down with my younger self, I would probably start out with, it's okay. And there's so many stereotypes out there of everybody, right? I mean, Deborah just gave a moving discussion of a very large community that's been stereotyped, and there's many of them. And for me as an introvert, there are stereotypes that many people know and still today believe. But for me as a little kid and a teenager, I believe those stereotypes in myself, because that's what I heard and that's what I felt, that I was different, that I couldn't socialize, that I was a loner, because I liked my alone time. And so I think if I sat down with my younger self, the first thing I would say is it's okay. Everybody's different and we all have our strengths, and we should be proud of the differences that we have instead of kind of being shy or not wanting to share those differences. And what I've learned over time, and it's taken a long time, is that I really, the world needs my voice out there. The world needs everybody's voice out there. And so to the extent that we can learn from where we are and the path we've come from and believe it and share those strengths that we all have, then that makes the world better. I mean, even from a office perspective, I tried to push myself to participate in a lot of those office meetings, and some of it came naturally and some of it was very difficult. But those business meetings are better when they have a diverse group of people and experiences and voices figuring into questions or topics that need decisions. And so I would try and give myself some of that strength. I kind of wasted, it was my journey. We all go through journeys. We can't be born at 50 years old. And so it's my journey, and I think it brought me to where I am today. But certainly I kind of feel like I wasted a lot of energy on some of the negative things that I've finally been able to dispel for myself. Social media is a horribly fantastic thing. And so a lot of people share their comments about the recent racial tensions on social media. And then there's always this backlash of other people that say, well, you don't have the right or position to be able to comment on those sort of things. And I mean, I guess that's the beauty of social media, is there's certainly no shortage of perspectives and views. But I'm wondering, what do you think that others can do to help in a constructive way to move the dialogue forward, to improve race relations and just kind of make it a thing of the past finally?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people will post things out of ignorance. And by that, I mean, like, really honestly not understanding something. And I think something as simple as just asking a question instead of making a statement, it could be a huge game changer, right? I think as you continue to allow your timeline to be a place of diverse thought, and don't write people off the minute they disagree with you, and really listen to people as they share with you, especially if they have more experience, that is a great place that social media could then be used as a starting point for some of these really difficult conversations that we're going to have to navigate.
So we mentioned, Deborah, in your bio that you had an opera at the Houston Grand Opera that I believe occurred right before coronavirus, and was, so can you tell us a little bit about that and how amazing that might be to have some of your works represented at the Houston Grand Opera?
Absolutely. We actually debuted the weekend before Houston shut down. So it was kind of the perfect timing to get it out in the world. The opera Marian song was composed by Damian Sneed, and I wrote the entire libretto book for it, which is all the text of the opera. And so we decided that we wanted to create something that was a hybrid of performance poetry and opera. and really bring it into understanding a modern, take on opera for a new audience. And so we kind of chronicle the journey of Marian Anderson seen through the eyes of a young girl by the name of Nevaeh, who is rushing back to stop the demolition of Marian Anderson's church when she was a younger kid. And so it's just a really great thing to kind of see something that you created in a closet in your room somewhere, take a full production and a full cast, and to hear songs that you kind of sung to yourself under your breath. The Houston Grand Opera is really great to work with, and we got to see do a few different workshops, kind of how it was playing out, but to see it opening night in all of its grandeur really was something that I think I will cherish and I will definitely repeat.
Thanks for everybody staying a little bit later. I hope you enjoyed the question and answer. So there's two groups of people I really want to thank. So if you didn't pick up on it, this was actually my my book launch that was originally scheduled for March, but obviously we all had changes to our lives over the last few months. And so I really am thankful to have such amazing people and writers join me, and Jim, Margot, and Deborah, and really made it super special. I'm so happy that you guys got to share your work with the audience as well. And finally, the other group that I really wanted to thank was my family, who's tucked into different corners here in the room. And so my wife, Jennifer, who's been with me through so many experiences that are in my book and many experiences that are not in my book. And she's been my rock and continues to be that. My daughter, Gwendolyn, who listened to me practicing, as introverts tend to practice until we can't do it anymore. So she heard me practice when we took walks in the neighborhood and so forth. And so she was definitely helping me out there. Madeline, who's been our moderator, and Noah, who's been a big help on the technical side and trying to pull all this together and make it work very smoothly. So couldn't go through life, let alone this evening, without each one of them. So thanks again for everybody that joined us. Please check out our websites. There's more information from each person. There's how you can get everybody's book on the website. We always appreciate comments and questions and shares as well, and reviews. So please help yourself to any and all of the websites. Thanks again for joining us on Prose with the Pros. Have a great evening and wear a mask.